Throughout the original series of Dexter, I don't think I've seen any character as controversial or hated as much as Dr. Evelyn Vogel. We all know season 8 of the show is regarded to be pretty bad, but that doesn't mean there weren't any good ideas displayed in the final season. But what happens when those good ideas are poorly executed? Today, let's dive into why everyone hates poor old Dr. Vogel. For those who didn't watch past Dexter season 4, we first meet Vogel in episode 1 of season 8, A Beautiful Day. Evelyn is a neuropsychologist that has moved back to Miami for work and to help the current brain surgeon investigation. Throughout her introductory police briefing, her eyes keep meeting Dexter's, and it doesn't help that she's somewhat of a psychopath whisperer. Not long after, she requests for Dexter to come down to the morgue, and it's here we get to justify our theory of her definitely knowing something. She seems to have a particular interest in the Bay Harbor butcher and wishes she could have interviewed him. After this conversation, Dexter's worried she could be onto him, but this isn't even the crazy part. In their second interaction, at the end of the episode, Vogel gives an envelope to Dex. Inside, we see creepy kid drawings signed by Dexter himself. Now, I'm sure as kids we all drew some messed up shit, but coming from Dex, this is bad. He chases Vogel and asks her what she wants, and she says he can't kill her because she doesn't fit the code. Funny enough, episode 1 is in fact Vogel's best episode. We get a solid introduction to her character, and by the end of the episode, still question what she really wants. Up till now, we've never even heard another character mention Harry's code. So how much does Vogel really know? Whether you like her or not, so far, she is an interesting addition to the story. For a majority of the fandom, episode 2 is where everything goes wrong. It's revealed to us that Vogel is also the creator of the code. She knows everything about Dexter and helped Harry devise a way for Dex to live freely in the world. This is a major retcon. As far as we knew, for 7 seasons, Harry was the sole creator of the code. It was his code. It worked extremely well because it made us question his actions as a father. Should he get the right help or help his son in his own way? In hindsight, he ends up getting the wrong help from the right person. The problem with this retcon is that it undermines every flashback we see from Harry in the early seasons. To me, I've always thought Harry deeply loved Dex and always wanted him to be free, but I loved how sinister Harry felt. To prove my point, let's compare 2 important scenes from season 1 and 8. In episode 1 of the first season, we get a flashback to when Harry forms the code. He sees that Dex's urge is growing and they can't control it with just animals anymore. The way Harry explains it is that since it's not Dexter's fault for the way he feels, they have to channel his urge and use it for good. There are terrible people in the world that the police can't catch, but maybe if Dexter learned how to spot them, he could take out the ones deserving. Harry ends the conversation telling Dexter that he is loved and he is not alone. Now, let's compare this to the final videotape we see in season 8, episode 4. Harry visits Vogel and tells her how he walked in on Dexter's ritual. The blood, the body parts, the plastic, it all overwhelmed him. Dexter looked proud, and why wouldn't he be? After all, Harry mostly created this. Although the victim was a criminal who murdered Harry's partner, it still felt wrong. Vogel tells him that according to the code, the man deserved his fate, but Harry argues that no one deserves to be in pieces. To him, the code is a theory, an idea. He can't live with the result. Although this matches up with Harry's character not being able to live with what he created, this is pathetic. To claim a code he gave to his teenage son on how to get away with murder just being an idea is laughable. Let's not forget, before season 8, Harry is the one who teaches Dexter everything he knows. In early seasons, it is quite clear what Harry's intentions are. He even goes as far as showing Dexter what would happen if he got caught. To me, Vogel being a part of the code is interesting, but can't work. Instead of the retcon humanizing Harry, it ruins him. We already understand that Harry was essentially guilty for grooming Dexter and was only trying to do right by him in his own way. This last videotape butchers the great character of Harry, and whether you think he is the true villain of the show or a man trying to help his son, Vogel's entanglement doesn't help with either perspectives. The fandom understands that Vogel's inclusion in the code destroys Harry's character and is ultimately a bad retcon. Another reason for the hate is that the majority of the fandom consider Vogel's arc to be lackluster. She is introduced as a threat to Dexter, but becomes his damsel in distress mother figure. Now, I'm personally a sucker for seeing my boy happy and don't have a problem with Vogel, but I understand the notion of her story being boring. Her son turns out to be the brain surgeon, but what if she was? Imagine Dexter's final conversation with his creator and how bittersweet it would feel to put an end to her. On the topic of theorizing an evil Dr. Vogel, what I consider evil is the writers deciding to make her constantly shocked at how Dexter has no emotions. Yes, I understand it's to show his growth, but I've watched 7 seasons of this shit. I already know he changes. With that being my only annoyance with this character, I do actually like her dynamic with the Morgans. Although she acts as a spiritual mother for Dexter, it's easy to forget she is the reason Deborah finally accepts her brother being a serial killer. Without Evelyn's involvement, I think Deborah could have had a worse fate than the one we got. Maybe even logging out of the server herself. At the end of the day, we can only cry about potential storylines Vogel could have had and admit her tale became lackluster. The only question that remains is, did Dr. Vogel deserve the hate? I personally think yes and no. For one, her inclusion in the code destroys Harry's character. In an attempt to further humanize Harry, the show creates a massive difference between flashback Harry and season 8 Harry. When it was Harry's code in the early seasons, he came across as being hellbent on his son's survival. Like I mentioned earlier, he also felt sinister, almost as if he sent his son on an impossible mission, catching the people the police couldn't, catching the ones he couldn't. Although in the end he couldn't live with his creation for the most part, he very much viewed the code as a positive way to channel his son's needs. In contrast, Season 8 portrays a more worrisome and submissive Harry. He constantly questions his actions with Vogel and has to be reassured in order to continue their special way of handling Dex. In a sense, it shows a different side to the type of father he was, but loses the feeling of him being a twisted figure of hope for Dexter. Honestly, it's just about what you prefer, but most of the fandom, including me, prefer the original code. In regards to her character becoming lackluster, that truly is up for debate. I can see how her being the final antagonist of the show would have been amazing, but I don't think her character arc is necessarily bad. It doesn't help that overall Season 8 isn't a great season, and the fact it tries to introduce a new character with an importance similar to Harry. I think if she was a side character throughout the show, occasionally popping up, maybe it would have done her more justice. She feels almost too important to only have one season dedicated to her. Maybe the final season would have acted as a twist. A character we kinda know is actually Dexter's creator. Even though I like Vogel, I understand why the majority of the fandom hate her. Season 8 is a season most people want to forget, and maybe I'm just seeing the good and the bad. After all, a great idea isn't great if it's executed poorly. At the time of this recording, Dexter Original Sin hasn't finished yet, and we still haven't received a mention to the Doctor. My guess is she won't be mentioned in the prequel, and the writers will just pretend it never happened. In my opinion, I'd prefer if she did make an appearance. It was a gamble in Season 8, why not just stick to it? I suppose it's not needed since Original Sin actually succeeded in humanizing Harry with a good backstory. Out of every character in the original show, Vogel is definitely the most hated. And even I, Mr. Season 8, can understand why.